All right, I've got 10:30. This is Dave Ness. I'll call the meeting to order. Thanks for joining our Isicsb December monthly meeting. And if we could please have roll call.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Holly. Thank you.
Okay. Wendy Hess. Bridget Edson.
Present.
Mindy Benson.
Present.
Michelle Bischoff.
Present.
Curtis Woughton.
Present.
David Ness.
Here. Holly, you've got quite some background noise, or somebody does.
There we go. David Ness.
Here.
Daniel Schaefer.
Here.
Dan Fank.
Here.
Jason Schlutenhofer.
Here.
Angela Klauser.
Here.
Haley Nichols. Cindy Hike.
Present.
Peter Huffman.
Here.
Grace Kendig.
Here.
Keith Hove.
Here.
Patrick Updike.
Here.
Blake Jerushi. Thought I saw Blake on. Blake, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay. Jessica Turba.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Wendy Hess is here. I got here late.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. If we just want to start down the left column of the agenda and just introduce, now that we know you're here, who you're representing. We'll start with Wendy at the top.
Wendy Hess with Woodbury County Communications, representing communication centers.
Thank you. Bridget?
Bridget Edson, Chickasaw County Rescue Squad, representing EMS.
Great, thank you. Mindy?
Sorry, I had to get mute button off. Mindy Benson with Tama County Emergency Management, representing emergency managers for Iowa.
Super. And Michelle Bischoff?
Michelle Bischoff, Des Moines Fire, representing Iowa Pro Chiefs.
Thank you. Curtis?
Curtis Woden, with Lake Volunteer Fire Department, representing Volunteer Fire.
Great, thank you. Again, I'm Dave Ness, Municipal Police from Des Moines. Dan Schaefer, I don't think I've seen the name.
Yep, Denison Police Department, representing Municipal Police.
Excellent. Missed you before, but thank you for jumping on today. Welcome. And on to Dan Frank.
Dan Fank, Worth County Sheriff's Office, representing Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Jason?
Jason Schlutenhofer, Wright County Sheriff, representing Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Angela?
Angela Klauser, Panorama Schools, member at large.
Thank you. And Haley, have you jumped on by chance? On to Cindy.
Cindy Hike with the Iowa Department of Public Health.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Peter?
Peter Huffman, Iowa Department of Transportation.
And Trace?
Trace Kendig, Iowa DNR.
Thanks for joining us. Heath?
Keith Hove, DPS, interim.
Thank you. Patrick?
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Blake?
Blake Jerushi, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
And Jessica?
Jessica Turba, Office of the Chief Information Officer for the state of Iowa.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us on the Isicsb board, and thanks for joining us this morning. All right. I do not have any prepared formal remarks. Just welcome everybody today, and thanks for your continued patience with our remote meetings. Thanks also for squeezing us into your busy schedules between health, police, fire, emergency management. We've all got a lot going on, so I appreciate you making time to help advance this important cause of interoperability. All right. Unless there's something people would like moved on today's agenda, I'll entertain a motion for it.
So moved.
Woden motion.
Bischoff.
I think I heard a Bischoff and a second by Wotan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 12, 2020 meeting.
So moved. Slutenoffer.
Second, Bank.
I heard Jason, and I couldn't make out the second name.
Dan Bank.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Chris, we're on to the SWIC report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is my audio coming through okay?
Sounds great.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll start off with a look at the bigger picture today. Nationally, the FCC did release a draft rule in the Federal Register on November 27th that is slated to go into effect possibly on December 30th. That's when that comment period ends as well. The board members, you may have seen in this document packet, you received some draft comments that we could submit, assuming they're approved today. Essentially, that will be discussed more in line during new business, but it does involve the potential reclassification of some spectrum that was previously assigned to public safety. So otherwise, nationally, this was supposed to be the scheduled national week of meetings for the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators. That meeting was originally scheduled to be in Pasadena, but COVID prevented an in-person meeting, so they've stretched those sessions out over the past couple of weeks. Topics that are germane to Iowa stakeholders include the aforementioned FCC proposed changes to 4.9 gigahertz. They also had several presentations on national level events that we could probably take a few things from over time here in Iowa. There was a presentation on the wildfire season in the western half of the U.S. that was exceptionally prolific this year. Bureau of Land Management and other associated agencies talked about large-scale, long-term fire responses and the type of equipment needed to help facilitate successful operations there, and additional planning that had to be done to help keep the firefighters that were on scene in good health. There's also a nice presentation on the presidential inauguration and planning for other national special security events. One big thing that we can take away from that session is that we're doing a lot of the right things and trying to make sure that we coordinate deployables and frequencies that are going to be in perhaps an unfamiliar area to prevent problems. In the DC metro area, what they'll tend to do is something that they've dubbed frequency wars, where they'll bring everybody in before the event starts, light everything up, and then see what interferes with something else, and then work towards a remedy from there. The one takeaway from that session is that if you can front load some of that work, it's always a good idea to do that, and that's what we're trying to do with some of the things we have currently out and working on at this point. There was also a discussion of a need for computer-aided dispatch interoperability and possible pathways to that. Keep your eyes and ears open for reference of a common data standard. This data standard is thought to be a pathway so that you could get disparate CAD systems talking to each other long term. The people that gave a presentation, and some of them were industry leaders, did not necessarily give a timeline on deployment of that, but they did discuss it. Someone does have the phone line open. If you could mute that, please, just so we can avoid excessive background on the recording, that'd be great. Another thing that was presented was encryption interoperability. This aligns with some other state-level initiatives that we've been working on in the past. And then also they started discussing what communications training looks like during the pandemic and after, and lessons that each individual state has learned. I'm happy to report that what we've done here to try to facilitate successful training has also been done in other states. So we do align well with what's going on nationally at this point, and we've made a lot of good decisions this year. And for that, I want to pat all the board members on the back for their contributions to helping make sure that we can continue to keep the lights on during these times. Looking a little bit more locally in Iowa, we still have those 2 active SDR trailer deployments in Atkins and in Clinton. We've been supporting those as much as we possibly can. It includes any necessary troubleshooting. And recently we've been working on what the billing and financial components look like with respect to reimbursement. I've worked pretty closely with the vendors that are involved and also HSCMD to try to make sure that process is as smooth as possible. Been working on a lot of agencies recently, or working with them in their path to join Isicsb. Every so often I take a look back at my phone calls and emails before these meetings to get a sense of what was done. And several agencies posed questions this month, and we were able to get those answered to help them on their path towards interoperability, so that's also good. As far as training goes, I've been working with the training committee and ICTAP, which is in CISA, to make sure that we can get our next round of TAs in. Those are looking to be more and more likely as we go throughout the next several months, so be on the lookout for that. We'll have more on that during the training report. I have assisted in the completion of a couple more virtual training sessions on Isicsb access within the PSAP and how to use things with respect to the interoperability talk groups and status board in cooperation with DPS. We do have more scheduled for in December, so if your agency wants to sign up for training in January and February and thereon, please let me know. We can conduct this any way that you would need it delivered, in person or virtual. There may be a pause on in-person training for the time being, but once that opens up again, we will definitely work to meet your needs. Status board, a couple of updates on that really quick. Things have been running smoothly over the past month. Did also have a chance to present on our use of status board along with Minnesota recently at the National Council of SWCS meeting. There was a lot of national interest from other states as well, and those discussions that ensue from that presentation may open up some very interesting opportunities for interstate collaboration and cooperation on this program. The issues that we identified here very early on in our process with coordinating of resources is pretty common throughout the rest of the country, and I think there's a pathway forward to not only enhance interoperability, but help promote and enhance the awareness of interoperable resources, their current status, and their use. So as far as status board goes, again, we're still accepting applications for that if you haven't signed up yet. If you are a comm center manager, a dispatcher, or someone in command level staff, you are eligible for access along with emergency management and other key personnel within Iowa. Please let me know and we'll get you signed up. There is no cost for this service as well. And if you want some training on status board, we can set that up as well. It takes about 30 to 60 minutes depending on the questions. And this will also be in the next round of regional training that we will be putting on, hopefully in the first half of 2021, or at least getting that started. That is my report, Mr. Chair. I will go ahead and take any questions.
Comprehensive report as always. I don't hear any questions, so thank you for that, and we'll move on to Mr. DeRushi.
All right, thank you, everyone. From the 911 council meeting that was held earlier today, we covered a vast array of topics. I would encourage you to watch the recording of that if any of these kind of perk your interest. Normally we have the recording posted on the same day, so later today or tomorrow that should be up and running. If you're interested, let me know and I can get you the link. But hitting the highlights, at this point we have 50 PSAPs migrated to the merged wireline next generation 911 network. Again, for anyone that's new, that's basically putting the legacy landline 911 traffic onto the next generation 911 network. So we're kind of at a pause. Holiday moratoriums are in effect starting next week already. So we'll pick that up again beginning of next calendar year and finish that deployment off. Exciting news on the shared services effort. Again, for those that might be unaware, that is basically sharing call handling equipment between the PSAPs. So not every 911 answering point needs to have their own backroom call handling equipment. One of the efforts that I've briefed on for a number of months now is basically adding redundancy using Firstnet LTE. Previously, the connections between the host call taking equipment and the PSAPs is done primarily over ICN. That's great, that works really well, except if there's an outage or a maintenance on that one single connection, then the PSAP would lose a lot of what they're normally used to receiving, including 911 calls. So we undertook an effort with ICN and Firstnet and Zetron to basically add a second connection using the Firstnet LTE. That was turned up in the first PSAP yesterday as Marion County turned up on the shared services. We implemented that as well. We will now go back and retrofit the other 20 or so PSAPs that are in that shared services environment. It worked really well. So really, even if a call is midstream and ICN were to go down, that call does not drop. There's a couple second pause while the connection flips over to the Firstnet, and then that call continues. So really minimal disruption. The call does not drop. And again, thanks to everyone's effort on that. And it's a fairly big deal. Basically, an extra 20 PSAPs will have even more reliability and redundancy to not drop or lose calls. And obviously important and a big deal, like I said. A couple of other things I wanted to highlight that we covered in the 911 council meeting. There was significant kind of really public education, I would call it, in regards to 988, which is going to become the National Suicide Hotline. Congress and the FCC passed a law and wrote some rules surrounding this. Basically is implementing a 3-digit short code nationally to reach the National Suicide Hotline. It kind of really just on the periphery touches 911. We needed to make sure that 988 was not previously provisioned for some other short code within the state, and we also needed to make sure that only 10 digits were provisioned as star codes, as short digit dialing. The reason for that is in the area codes of 515 and 319, mandatory 10-digit dialing will be implemented. That means you won't be able to dial 7 digits in those area codes and reach a local number. The reason for that, if you think about it, is those area codes have a 988 prefix within them. So think of 515 988. If you just dialed 988 from now on, once this is implemented, you would reach the National Suicide Hotline, not your neighbor down the street. So there is an effort between the Iowa Utilities Board, the Iowa Communication Alliance, to get some of that public information out. Again, it really just touches 911 on the periphery, but I think it's an interesting enough topic and close enough to
pick up. HOVE, last name.
Yes, sorry, there's somebody that's not on mute. If you just spelled something, you're not on mute. So thank you. I'll go ahead and continue. So I think the 988 effort is not necessarily directly related to 911, but it's close enough to kind of the folks at the table within communications that it's an interesting enough topic that really what we're doing is spreading public information on this effort. It'll go into effect starting in April of next year, so I expect that communication to ramp up. But again, if you're in the 515 or 319 area codes, you will have to start dialing 10 digits on any local phone call. So again, we covered a lot more information than just that within the 911 council meeting, but I think for the Isicsb board's purposes, I will wrap up my briefing now, unless there's any questions.
Great report. Thank you, Blake. User Group Committee, Vice Chair Rob Dennert.
Greetings. The User Group Committee met on November 19th. The bulk of the business was examination of 4 applications: Alameda County, SIPCO, Jefferson County, and the Nebraska OCIO. All those will be considered later in the meeting under new business for membership.
Any questions for Rob? Hearing none, we'll move on to finance with Swick Myers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In front of me, I will pop these up now. You can see our financial statements. Total expenditures out of the Broadband and Interoperability Fund for the month of November were $6,794.10. For SLIGP 2.0, we had expenditures totaling $9,218. Of those, $7,374 were federal expenditures. We also, at the last finance meeting, discussed the STR trailers that are currently deployed and paying the bills for the work that was done to get the West STR into wide area connection. Those vendors are working on getting us the invoices for that work, and then we will pay them. And I've been working closely with HSEMD on the reimbursement processes for that equipment purchase and installation and deployment for the board to seek reimbursement on. That's the financial report for the month. Do any of the board members have any questions?
Thank you, Chris. Hearing none, we'll move on to Governance Committee Chair, Mr. Huffman.
Governance Committee met on Monday. We didn't have anything formally on the docket, so we discussed the proposed policy update from the FCC that Swick Myers mentioned earlier this morning, just trying to feel out how we believed that Isicsb would deal with that if it came through as it was. And then we discussed some of the comments he proposed that I believe we'll be looking over later this meeting. And that's it.
Any governance questions? On to the Operations Committee, Chair Bischoff.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Operations Committee met November 19th and December 2nd and discussed policy that the Standards Working Group had produced or edited and provided comment back to them, as well as we discussed the TA for the field guide and moving forward with that, and our obligations that are mentioned within the shared system study to provide a playbook of how agencies would be able to utilize Isicsb as a means in which to communicate. Those are the items. One other item. As a precursor to the field guide, we have come up with an advisor guide that will be disseminated soon for comment as that first step of being able to get something into the hands of end users regarding Isicsb and what's available and what it can be used for of the various talk groups. What questions are there regarding operations? Thank you.
Thank you. Outreach Committee, Swick Myers.
Yeah, Holly is working on putting on the finishing touches of the Isicsb Board's newsletter for the past month. And again, thank you for everybody that contributed to that, including you, Mr. Chair. We are always looking for public safety and public service personnel to feature within that report or that newsletter. So if you are someone you know would be a good fit to profile for the month, please let us know. That report will be one of the big conduits as well for pushing news from the board, including what it may look like for our regional training sessions going forward as far as dates, times, and locations. So please be on the lookout for that. And of course, if you have any content you want to submit to the newsletter, please let us know. In addition to the newsletter, you heard me mention those sessions before for regional training. The newsletter, again, will be a good conduit for getting that information out, and we will also organize those sessions to provide some updates on other things that are going on within the state of Iowa with respect to interoperability. That's the report for the Outreach Committee. I'll go ahead and take any questions.
All right, hearing no questions, we'll move on to the Training Committee. Vice Chair Broadus.
Mr. Chair, if she's not able to report, I can go ahead and give a quick synopsis of what was covered.
That'd be super. Please proceed.
All right. Continued talks on training modules for the Isicsb standards and getting those produced and developed. One big focal point recently, again, was the discussion of the regional training sessions that the board will be looking at putting on in conjunction with partners next year. Also, the training committee discussed and decided to go forward with the request for the field operations guide to be developed for Iowa with partnership from CISA and ICTAP. What this will do for us is we will be able to access CISA resources to produce a paper field operations guide that would be approximately the same size as the NIFOG, so it'll fit in a pocket or a backpack really easily. And we'll end up with an electronic version that will be basically an application format on iOS or Android. The nice thing is that CISA helps us out tremendously with the cost and deployment and development of the app so that it doesn't really cost us anything. So we don't necessarily incur long-term developmental issues that may come with putting something on the iOS landscape or within Android. Those developmental worlds can get fairly nebulous and expensive really, really quickly, especially when they choose to do a pivot on standards, and CISA takes care of all that for us, so that's good. One other thing that's coming out of the training committee that's in new business for this month is a directive that's in draft form right now, but if it is approved by the board today, it will grant an extension for our ComU trainees to complete their position task books, also known as PTBs. From the moment a trainee completes the ComL, ComT, or INTD courses that we offer through our program here and in partnership with CISA, they've got 3 years to fill those out so they can become credentialed. Now, given that 2020 has been an exceptional year and a lot of that stuff has been canceled, or at least the opportunities to complete those books, the training committee felt that it is fair to the applicants to extend out the timeline to complete those PTBs. So that is in new business, and that draft directive was sent out with the documents today, and we'll discuss that more in new business. That is my report. I'll go ahead and take questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Technology Committee. That update.
Thank you. Technology only met on December 1st because of the holiday in November. And so one of the things that was brought to our attention was the use of Iowa channel within the radios around the state. If you're not familiar with the Iowa channel, it's a VHF channel at 151.475 megahertz. It was originally set up to, in part, aid the highway helper type settings. The question was why isn't this channel, this frequency listed within the ICS 217A form? And so we spent the better part of this call discussing the pros and cons, I guess, if you will, about why it is not on the ICS 217A. The Iowa channel is licensed to the state of Iowa under, I guess you can say, the control of DPS. it requires a special use agreement. And so all of these things were brought out on the table as to why currently it's not in the 217A form, because it isn't really a frequency that you can just willy-nilly plug into your radios without having a special use agreement with DPS. And so after hashing all of this out, you know, it's one of those things where, do you really want to spend the time with, you know, putting all of this on DPS to try to figure out, okay, who's going to have a special use agreement, filling out forms and all the paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. So I know it sounds like we just do a lateral to the operations group to pick up on this and deal with it more. But we feel like we went through the technical part of it and think that now it's really more of operations to pick up that conversation. We did give them the information that we thought would be valuable for their group to deal with. So that was the gist of our whole meeting. We weren't able to get to our review of standards 1.5.0, 1.5.2, or the review of the Isicsb 12B policy, or the LTE deployable policy. But we'll have more information on that. Probably Chris can help me on that with the old business that's coming up in the agenda. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Firstnet Broadband Committee. Chair Bischoff.
Thank you, Chair. The Firstnet Broadband Committee met on December 8th and had our normal items of discussion regarding who's on Firstnet. There is interest beyond the state of Iowa for the who's on Firstnet. Nebraska is interested, so that's fantastic to hear. We had a further discussion about the deratio and AT&T's actions. With that, we met our new Firstnet Authority rep, Kevin Nida, as a part of our meeting. For those of you that don't know, Kyle has been reassigned, and Kevin Nida is our new rep for the authority. He is based in California and has a firefighting, technology, law enforcement background. He's very, very diverse. So we look forward to working with him. And that was the crux of the meeting. Are there any questions regarding the Firstnet subcommittee meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. Any information sharing between board members, limited to board members at this point in the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Motorola project manager.
Thank you, Chair. This is Steve Pyle. I'm the Motorola representative. I'm happy to report that the Isicsb system has entered into the three-year warranty period by contract. So, meaning all the sites and antennas and things are now covered under the warranty period. And again, that's a 3-year warranty period. We are also fully integrated into our Network Operations Center located in Illinois. So we are fully monitoring and dispatching to either internal Motorolans for service requests or our service partners. And that's my report.
Well, that was significant. And our next speaker, Tom Lampe, the system administrator, may elaborate a little bit on that. That's an exciting milestone. Tom, anything to add beyond that?
Yeah,
some of that's just a little bit inaccurate, but in regards to warranty. But we'll get through that. But yeah, we're under Motorola service right now, and what that means is what Steve said. They dispatch problems, techs to sites. They have subcontracted radio shops all over the state to respond to issues such as microwave paths are down, generators failed to start, little things like that. So they're fully on board with being dispatched to for sites for maintenance. Do you want me to just flow right into this then, Dave?
You bet. You've got the floor. Thank you.
Okay, so as far as system administrator standpoint report, there's 21,482 radios currently on the system today. We had 1,723,963 push to talks. Everybody push to talk on the radio for the month of November. We're working on now pushing out reports. We've been doing this for a little bit. Reports to the any user on the above a level 2, so the local subsystems get to see, especially with the added infrastructure and consoles and radios, how many push to talks they have and how their system's performing. If they have any busies on their system, we send that out each month as a service from the NOC. We will have a phone number shortly to the NOC, the Network Operating Center, which is located at JFHQ here soon. We have an email, and I'll say that here at the end. I'll give you the email at the end that we have established for the NOC as well. If you go onto the Isicsb website, Holly put a link up on the top. It'll say NOC. So if you click on that link, it should drop down, and then it will give you the email address to the NOC, and then soon we'll have the phone number where you could call direct into that. It's a 515 local number. We're also building a database, a massive one at that, for documentation of all issues. Anybody that calls into the NOC for a problem, or we work through a problem, such as coverage issues, site issues, like if they hear an alarm going off. We get a lot of calls where the generator alarm is beeping, or the light isn't functioning the right color in the day or at night, or if it's not functioning at all. We get calls like that. Open door alarms, all that kind of stuff rings into Schaumburg, and then they make a ticket on it, and they call us, and then we also document what we have for a report. We're also full-time monitoring. As you know, we have the Genesis program. We monitor that on a daily basis. Site monitoring, we watch the sites for loading. We watch the microwave pass. Eventually we'll get that it's set up. We just need to get it down to the NOC. Talk group monitoring, especially during events. We watch that real close to make sure that everybody's getting a beep instead of a bonk. And to this date, we really have not had an issue with any of that. System is quite healthy in regards to the number of talk paths that are available and the number of radios that are on each site. We are sending out, everybody that joined from level 1 through 4 was required to fill out a participation plan, and that's been revised in the last few years. The final copy now we have, we needed to get everybody's signature, so we started kind of a flow on that. If Chris, you bring that up, or if you have already done so. If you go on the last page of what you're seeing on the screen here, here's your participation plan. If you go down to the last page, there's a series of signatures. The first one's applicant. Looks like we need one on this one. The second one is from the technician that's assigned to the project for the length of the contract, and that currently is Steve Pyle. And Steve is also the person that's on the UGC committee. And if there's a level, especially in the level 3, 4 situation where they're adding radios and sites, he pushes the loading study to ensure that those radios are properly, got the number one proper radio and the number of radios and how many talk groups you're using, etc., to see if we need to add any channels to the site. So that's his job, and then that UGC approves that, sends it to the board for your approval. Next signatures is Chris. He goes through it, and then the last signature right now is mine, saying that go ahead and enter the radios with radio IDs that they requested into the system so they're activated. So that's what we're working on then. There's several hundred of those, so we're trying to catch up with that. Next week we have a subsystem meeting with Motorola. I will be meeting with all the subsystems that are adding to the system with sites and radios. There's quite a few. What we do is we keep making sure that we have a baseline for the subsystems and any others that are joining, especially when we have to do an MOA if they're joining and hanging equipment on the site, or if they're changing. Sometimes they change a site to a simulcast site, which benefits everybody. So we go through all those to keep current on all the subsystems, and then we ensure that we identify a subsystem and system administrator for that entity. So from the NOC perspective, we can send out emails to that person. So if there's any updates or if there's issues, they get notified. The last one is the Isicsb address. It is Isicsb, all one word, at dps.state.ia.us, and that's on the web page. And that's the report.
Well, Tom, appreciate your joining us today, and I don't think you were able to join our call last week, but it is wonderful to have you continuing to lend your experience and expertise to the board in this current interim role. While we're on the topic, I greatly appreciate Swick and the other committee chairs that have been probably, although they were already busy when you were the chair, they're doing even more when I am, because I haven't been able to get close to your level. So I appreciate that you're pinch hitting until a permanent selection is made on that critical role of system administrator.
You bet. Glad to do it.
All right. Any questions from board members to Tom? All right, we'll jump into the Firstnet to AT&T. Mr. Barnett, I think I saw on the board.
Yes, sir. Chair, I am here. First off, we had 2 new full cell sites that were added to the Firstnet network during the month of November. Those are located, one is southwest of Dubuque. It is on US 151 near Bernard, Iowa. And the second one was west of Des Moines and Redfield, Iowa. We also added 2 small cell nodes to help with service in Waukee and Des Moines. The small cell node in Waukee is near Ashworth and Southeast University Avenue, and the one added in Des Moines is East 30th Street at Dean Avenue. So we continue to help fill in those gaps with the small cell nodes also. Tomorrow, myself, Chair Bischoff, I believe Mr. Lampy now, and others will be meeting with Governor Reynolds to give the governor a post-derecho update to include Firstnet response during the derecho and plan generators for next year. And we will be able to report back on that meeting next month. That is all I have for today. I'll be glad to entertain any questions if anyone has any. And I do believe Kevin with the Firstnet Authority I think he's on the line. I think I saw. Kevin, if you wanted to introduce yourself to the group real quick, please do so, sir.
Thank you very much. Kevin Ida here, Senior Public Safety Advisor with the Firstnet Authority, and glad to be here today. I've got a quick update from our board meeting if you have time. If not, we can report at the next meeting. So glad to be here, and I've sent my information, contact info out, so call or email anytime.
Excellent, Kevin. Thank you. I think Chair Bischoff reported previously, and Mr. Barnett, but really appreciate you joining us, and it sounds like they're excited to have you leading the team.
The report that Kevin would give is for a different meeting than I reported on. He's referring to the authority board meeting.
Relevant, Michelle, you want to hear it for the group?
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, yes.
Super. Please proceed.
Okay, so yesterday we had our final board meeting for the 2020 calendar year. One of the highlights was the Chief Harlan McEwen Public Safety Broadband Communications Award was presented to Chief Jeffrey Lane from the Gainesville Fire Rescue Department in Florida. He has participated at an extraordinary level and provided extraordinary leadership and significant contributions to the advancement of public safety broadband communications. And some key milestones and accomplishments for 2020 included more than 14,000 agencies have signed up for Firstnet with 1.7 million devices. With regard to the network build-out, AT&T continues to deploy Band 14 ahead of schedule. Less than 3 years into a 5-year timeline, we're at about 80%. Investments to advance the network were also approved. This gives us a path to 5G, additional deployables, and our public safety engagement division handled more than 1,000 engagements in 2020. And so I'm very glad to be here and represented the Firstnet Authority to Iowa. And then one of the business items was they passed a resolution for further investment into the Firstnet core, which is going to give management the authority to fund the core's operations and maintenance and advances for our efforts to equip Firstnet with initial 5G capabilities. So obviously 5G is really important, and that's got to be brought into our core just like the other AT&T bands as well as our Band 14. So that concludes the brief report. And again, glad to be here. Back to you.
Great, thank you. All right. CISA update with Jim Lundstedt.
Chair Ness, this is Chris. I believe Mr. Lundstedt is out on medical leave this week.
Thank you. And do you want to roll into Standards Working Group?
Yes. Today's update will be a brief from the Standards Working Group. The Thanksgiving holiday precluded a meeting on discussion of standards, although that may work to our benefit to some extent. We will be meeting before the Christmas holiday in December, especially the week prior to when people start taking vacation. One of the RIC meetings recently pointed out that there's some level of priority that should be given to some standards. So that will be roped into the next meeting. And this is regarding air ambulances. So the next time we meet, we will be discussing standard 1.5.2, which is the use of the regional and statewide interop talk groups for those air ambulance vehicles, along with other standards, including 1.5.0, 4.8.0, which is our notification for system changes and outages, an update to 4.2.0, which would be agency maintenance, and an update to 1.10.0, which covers cross-spectrum interoperability and some very high-level amounts of patching. So those are on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you. Any questions of Chris on the Standard Working Group? Hearing none, we'll move to old business, sub-regional talk group update. Michelle, anything new?
Yes. The city of Des Moines, both police and fire, are on our new subsystem, and the sub-regional talk groups have been utilized already. Fire went live December 1, and at our January meeting, once I've got a full month of data, I will give a more thorough report as to the usage and gather some feedback from users as to how well or not the system is working, but up to this point, it's working very well. It's working as intended. So look forward to a full report in January.
Very exciting. Thank you. Chris, you want to update on Control Station?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is mainly some buttoning up type work that continues, primarily focused around the final inventory. With respect to the control station updates as well, we will still be offering one-on-one training, probably in perpetuity. You never know when someone within the center is going to need training on how to use the interoperable talk groups, and we plan on always making that available. So if you do want to sign up, we can work with you on dates, times, and we'll let you know how that all works out, and we'll get the session scheduled and delivered. We are getting closer to the overall PSAP grant closeout as well. I'll be working closely with Blake on that, and that's the report for the control stations for the month.
Great, thank you. Air to ground update?
Yeah, I can cover that quickly too. So with the air to ground policy, we're working on still kind of educating the comments that we received. The thing that we're trying to make sure we do is that as that policy is updated to reflect comments from stakeholders, we also make sure that we push that updated policy through at the same time as the air to ground or the regional interoperability talk group use for those air ambulances. That way, we're not only pushing the policy through, we're also basically pushing an ISIC standard through concurrently so that the documents can be married together, they can reference each other, and it can eliminate some potential confusion on that. Look for that work to be done over the next 2 months.
Thank you. LTE deployable, is that you or someone else?
I can cover it for Chair Updike. We have not had a chance to meet to discuss the comments that we received from CTIA. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, I do plan on reaching out to Ben Aaron over at CTIA. We have had a phone call already to discuss their comments and potential remedies to their concerns. And once we get a date lined up for the technology committee to meet again in January, we will be inviting them to that meeting when we discuss those comments.
All right. Don't go anywhere, Chris. Under new business, we have several ISICS user approval, and I received a message from Vice Chair Dennert that he had to jump off. So if you would please describe those, and then we'll entertain a motion.
Absolutely. So before you today, there are 4 agencies applying for ISICS access. Alma-Key County is applying for level 2 access for use within the county. They are kind of gradually adding in radios that are able to use the system, and they had a request for some talk groups as well. So that application has been reviewed by the user group committee and pushed forward for board approval. We also have SIPCO, which is a Central Iowa Power Cooperative, applying for level 2 access. This application is for level 2, so it does include some operational talk groups. Utility providers are covered under our MOA as well as being eligible users, so it certainly fits. Their primary use for this is going to be for emergency power restoration. As a result of the derecho, they realized when they were going about their efforts that communications were very, very difficult for them. They have some localized networks that they tend to utilize for day-to-day operations. And if where they go extends beyond that coverage, they have used cell phones in the past. Well, post-derecho, that MO didn't necessarily work. So the type of use here would be for emergency restorative processes. In speaking with them, they laid out how they're dispatched and where their talk groups would be. And they also talked about their typical use, which is usually pretty light. Motorola has reviewed this application for loading as well and has signed off on it, and the UGC has forwarded this on. Jefferson County and Fairfield PD are applying for level 3 access. They're looking for some talk groups, and this will take care of them for future access as well, potentially. The Nebraska OCIO / Nebraska State Patrol, they are applying for level 1 access. This is for a lot of radios for use along the border, interoperability only. This application was also signed off on by Motorola when it came to loading, and the user group committee has forwarded this on to the group here for approval. As a SWIC and a non-voting member, I cannot make a motion to approve these applications, but they are up for approval today, so we could open it up for motions if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair.
Sounds great. We'll entertain a motion to approve.
Bischoff will motion to approve all 4 applicants.
Benson will second.
All right. Bischoff and Benson have the motion and the second. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Position task book.
Yes, give me a second to get this open here. For some reason, Adobe is not playing nice right now, so I will go ahead and get that open here. Give me a second. There it is. All right, so this directive for the task book completion during the COVID-19 pandemic is something that, as the SWIC and in my conversation with other states as far as what's going on, we realized that we may lose some personnel to the ComU program because of this pandemic. If you look back at all the events that have been canceled this year, which I would wager is to easily say dozens, not counting training opportunities, and then if you look at where this may go long term, we may not have a full slew of events for trainees to complete their position task books until the second half of next year. And in some cases where we had just had completed a INTD course in Carroll County before the pandemic set in last year, those trainees have lost a half a year's worth of opportunities to complete those books. The same goes for our ComL trainees that had completed programs towards the tail end of 2019. Given that these are unprecedented times and we don't want to lose personnel to this program. In speaking with some other states and then bringing it back here to Iowa, we are looking at extending the amount of time that trainees that fall within this time period would have to complete their task books. Essentially, this directive would align it with whatever the governor's proclamations total to be. So if the governor's proclamations for the COVID-19 pandemic total 18 months, the extension will be 18 months. If it totals longer than that, it'll be that. The trainees will still have to prove competency and capability within their task books, and that'll be incorporated into their evaluation. But the universal thing is that a lot of these courses take upwards of 3, 4, and 5 days to complete in person. And especially for staff in Iowa, it is difficult to let personnel go for that extended amount of time. So the training committee has approved the language in this directive, bringing it to the board today for approval to extend the amount of time that trainees have to complete their PTBs relative to the length of time of the governor's proclamations for the COVID-19 pandemic. I will go ahead and pause there and take any questions on this before we put it up to a potential vote.
That's a great approach. In my opinion, hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Woden motion.
Hank will second.
All right, we've got a motion by Woden and a second by Fank. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? Motion carried. Legislative report. Chris?
Yeah, I'll dive into this one as well. So it's that time of year again to approve our annual legislative report. This is what is turned into the state legislature every year to show them what we have done as a board. And we are a very busy board with numerous busy committees as well. A couple of new things added this year include an executive summary. As this report has grown and matured over time with the board, its length has increased significantly. At this point, it is currently right around 65 pages long of content. So we have made an effort here within this report to include an executive summary to kind of make it, if someone just has a quick 2 minutes to look at what the board's done over the past year, they can find it there. The table of contents has been updated as well. And you've seen several copies of this at this point. It has a listing of the board members and the chair, and also notable events for 2020. So as this document has been edited, I have sent out several copies of it to the board. Where this one compares to ones you have previously seen is that there was a mention added recently of the VCall 10 document, along with some additional wording on the deployment of status boards, since that was a notable project that was for the most part completed in 2020 under extreme duress. One of the big themes throughout this report is that we were able to continue to keep the lights on even despite the pandemic and its effects of not being able to meet in person. And we were actually highly productive in advancing interoperability in Iowa. So given that, the only things that remain to be added to this document, and I usually leave these off until the end once this is approved, is including the attachment papers to this document. Reason for that is these PDFs can get very sizable, and with the number of documents Holly has to send out every month, there's a risk of kind of exceeding that 10 megabyte threshold for attachments on some email servers. So assuming the board chooses to approve this document today, the only thing that will change from now to submission to the legislature will be the including of the attachments, which would be our 2019 SCIP, current map of the Isicsb network, a map of the coverage testing that was completed in 2020, a complete listing of agencies that have joined Isicsb for interoperability or operability, a copy of the report of the Shared System Study Group, a copy of agreements that were completed in 2020. This includes the executed MOU between us and Illinois. You have to go all the way back to January and February to see that. And an Iowa, Minnesota interoperability procedural document that we worked very closely on with Minnesota, and Sheriff Hank was involved in the development of that as well. Updated standards for 2020 and the technical recommendation for VCall 10 would be included within the final packet, and we have spots for them to show up in the document as well. So with that being said, again, I'm not a voting member of the board, so Mr. Chair, I will open it up to you for potential motion and approval.
Sounds good. I'll entertain such motion.
So move. Woden.
Bischoff will second.
Wooten and Bischoff. Any further discussion? Great report, Chris. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And Chris, I think we're still with you at the FCC proposed rule change comments.
Yes, it's been a busy month. So recently, there has been some discussion within the FCC level groups of reallocating the 4.9 gigahertz spectrum. Now, 4.9 gigahertz may not seem like much to many until you start digging down a little bit into what the spectrum's history is and what it's historically been used for. Now, 4.9 is not something we would use for direct radio communications. However, it is pretty solid real estate when it comes to establishing a point-to-point microwave path between two sites so that they can exchange data. And given that the state of Iowa is moving to a lot of IP-based radio networks such as Isicsb, there's the potential there for this spectrum to have a pretty significant use going forward. Historically, the spectrum was allocated just to public safety, but the proposed rule change of the FCC would basically open this up to non-public safety agencies, freeze the current licenses as they are today. They would still be able to apply for renewal, but they would not be able to apply for an expansion of their license. So let's say if you're a county in Iowa and you've got one of these licenses, you would not be able to add another microwave point. Let's say you had to add a site on the peripheral of your service area. You would not then be able to do this without some extra special steps. So the thought process of the FCC is to take their hands off this and give it to the states to dictate. However, they have not outlined a path in the preamble or the proposed rule on how that should be conducted. They've got previous examples of how they have done that with respect to the 800 megahertz spectrum. Those are done through regional planning committees, and there's an outlined process for those regional planning committees to coordinate with each other. So if we have an application that is going to potentially affect Illinois or any other of our neighboring states, we can send it to them, and then they can give their comments, feedback, and eventually their concurrence. Now, as far as active licenses in this spectrum go, Iowa currently has 56 active licenses, and these are held primarily by locals. And my concern as the SWIC would be is that this spectrum is relatively clean right now, and we would want to maintain that for public safety if we could. If you have a question on where this rule lives, it is currently listed in the Federal Register at this website here, and the comment period closes for initial comments on December 30th. Of note, this document was posted for public inspection on November 27th, which is Black Friday, and then it was posted on this website in the Federal Register on November 30th. So there are many states that are looking at this change and going to possibly submit comments as well. Our comments basically center around several points. Number one, that the Isicsb board is opposed to this potential rule change due to a lack of clarity at this point in how any changes would be implemented and managed. So supporting arguments for that thesis statement being against it, there's an exceptional number of questions in the preamble. The preamble is around 16 pages long, and about 80 to 90% of it is questions. There's a lot of questions from the FCC on how to proceed with this. Basically, it's we could do this, we could do that. What do you think? And the thought process there is that given that there's a number of questions, the implementation of this rule should be postponed. The FCC should hold hearings with stakeholders and elicit feedback before implementing any changes, so a sound framework is established. Then also it goes on to say that any prioritization of 4.9 gigahertz should remain in favor of public safety. It would benefit short-term and potential long-term plans in Iowa. It also touches on the fact that there's very little guidance on how states would interact with each other. And the concern there is that we may have a process in place, but if our neighboring states don't follow that process, we can start running into issues in how we coordinate with each other. Specifically calls out item 17, that there will need to be a robust and clearly understandable set of rules to assist states in mitigating interference. If this is left open to interpretation, you're going to have fragmentation and potential for harmful interference to ensue. And it does specifically call out the past use of regional planning committees. Regional planning committees are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they are pretty effective. Number 5 relates to expertise and training required to evaluate potential applications if it's in the state's lap. States will need personnel and specific training, and they'll have to understand how Fresnel zones work between these microwave paths, which they do operate slightly different than your standard LMR. In order to effectively manage this as well, you will likely need someone that they've designated as a band manager. Based on kind of the preamble and some of the questions or statements that are within that, it looks like you're going to need at least a half an FTE to handle that, and that would run between $27,000 and $42,000 a year based on salary alone if you assume that they will be a communications engineer. The FCC does say that there's an opportunity for states to try to lease this out to collect fees. However, depending on the fee charge, you may not be able to recoup enough money to cover that individual's salary and benefits. And there's some laws within certain states that private companies cannot profit off of state infrastructure. There's also a rule or potential law necessary to say that the state could collect or establish, collect, and then expend any type of revenue that would come in from these fees. Point 7 covers oversight and housing of licenses in an interstate scenario. We may not have awareness of what our neighboring states are doing with these types of deployments, and the FCC will have to continue to be a repository and preferably a way to handle new applications. It also kind of wades into waters that are not germane to this type of rule change. related to 911 fee diversion. That's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but it would basically take away the ability of a state to manage this if they start diverting 911 fees. To me, at least, this seems completely unrelated to the subject matter and should not be in the rule. Blake, given your role as the 911 program manager, does that seem on point with that? I saw you unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I was going to weigh in on this topic specifically just to provide kind of some color commentary. The FCC has for a number of years now tried to dissuade states from diverting their 911 surcharge fees. We have been on that list in the past on one particular report out of the 12 years that they've reported this. It is one commissioner in particular's pet peeve, and that particular commissioner's term is expiring. I don't know how the commission will approach this topic going forward with two commissioners total turning over. There also is an open proceeding specific to this topic that is separate from this one, where it really, that's the entire point of the proceeding is to try to figure out ways to dissuade 911 fee diversion. So our office here within the state on topics like this often will work through NASNA, which is the association of my counterparts, basically the 911 administrators in all of the states. We, of course, did file comments on that proceeding and basically compared this type of thing to when your son messes up punishing your daughter. So we've made our stance on this kind of thing known. And Chris is right, it's not germane to this topic. The FCC is really just trying to figure out how best to punish states that do divert their 911 fees. This is kind of bleed over from that topic. And I think the statement here is spot on.
All right, thank you, Blake. A few final points that are in the draft comments here. It talks about the grandfather clauses for existing licenses. This rule would preclude them from expanding their footprint. As I mentioned before, let's say you're one of the counties or agencies that have licenses for these microwave paths. This would preclude you from adding another path without having to go through whatever the new licensing process looks like. So if you're looking at this from a local agency standpoint, if you are a county that's using 4.9 and you've got existing licenses, you would be able to renew them. But if you wanted to expand and add another link, you would then have to go through some different process, a different set of interpretations of rules, and potentially different record-keeping practices to add that. And for the local agencies, that seems like it's going to fragment the process and may lead to confusion and possibly even result in some management errors, which may result in some people not necessarily getting what they need. Point number 10 makes a reference to some other changes that have happened recently with 6 gig. You may have seen Wi-Fi 6 touted recently. That allows new internet routers to operate on 6 gigahertz spectrum. And it does basically allow for uncoordinated deployments of 6 gig. If you look at a lot of public safety networks, a lot of them will use 6 gigahertz as backhaul links between sites. There has been very little, if any, testing, and usually no testing, on what these types of internet devices will do if, let's say, you've got one mounted on the 30th floor of a high-rise building and you've got a microwave path link nearby. There's no known process at this point for testing and evaluating as to whether that wireless access point is going to cause interference with that microwave link. And it makes a reference to some documents that are on the FCC's website. One's basically a declaration that this is done and this is here now, and things of the sort. This came out the other day. There's a Senate bill on the floor now that would potentially compel the FCC to come up with interference mitigation strategies, but that bill is still a bill, and it has not been moved through the congressional chambers at this point that I'm aware of. One final item. 4.9 in the past was a spectrum that did not have to be immediately coordinated or licensed if you were going to use it. And at this point, the number of those deployments are unknown because they were uncoordinated. We may have active 4.9 gigahertz links that are out there today. And if something were done, and as a result of those changes, that previously critical connection were suddenly experiencing interference, that wouldn't be good for anybody. This would basically say that the FCC should give states appropriate time to investigate uncoordinated deployments so that we can qualify and quantify them, and then have a good understanding of what would need to be done to potentially mitigate any negative consequences. So that's a summary of the comments that we could submit to the FCC. I have checked with Jeff Peter-Zellick at the AG's office, and we do have the ability as a board to submit on this rule. So I will open it up to questions there.
Chris, this is Pat.
Yes, sir.
Why do you think that they would use this particular band to go after? Is it because it's more prime real estate than some of the other bands above and below as far as propagation values or properties?
So 4.9 gig is a mid-band spectrum, and it does have a lot of potential uses. The thing for us that's the most attractive is point-to-point microwave links for backhaul. But if you look at other things such as LTE bands, this is in the mid-band range. It's on the upper part of it, but it does allow a lot of throughput when it comes to potential LTE carriers. So I could see some interest in the LTE carriers in deploying this. There have been some words that utility companies are interested in this for whatever reason. But you know, looking at this and thinking long term, I think it's in our best interest to keep this limited to public safety if we can. Those are some of the other uses, though. LTE, I know utilities have some interest in it because it is a mid-band frequency.
Thank you.
Chris, this is Dave. As Blake suggested, sometimes working through national associations or groups is more effective or equally effective strategy. Are there opportunities for that as in addition to sending this from the Isicsb board?
Absolutely. So that touches on a couple of things. I have spoken to some contacts at the federal level. For example, the National Sheriff's Association, I believe, is opposed to this potential change as well, and I believe they are working on their processes. So the national groups, for the most part, are opposed to this, that I've been able to speak with. I can't say all because I haven't talked to them all, but the ones I've talked to are against it. Where these comments incoming from a state would be significant is that if this rule is put into effect, it's going to fall on the state to come up with a management strategy. So these comments coming from a state that would be directly impacted by this would potentially mean a lot. So hence the reason why, in addition to the national group submitting their comments, it may be beneficial for us as well as a state to submit these to the FCC.
Sounds good. Final comment from me was your advance work on your legislative report allowed you the time to prioritize this when we got it at the 11th hour. So you're to be commended for both being able to put this together in quick order, as well as having your other stuff completed to a degree that provided that flexibility. So any further comments for this prior to entertaining a motion? Any questions from Chris? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Schaefer will make the motion.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
Slutnoff, I'll second it.
All right, Jason, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. It was a long meeting. We still have an opportunity for public comment if there's people, non-board members that would like to comment. Our numbers have dwindled, but we appreciate the board members and non-board members that have stuck around and your continued participation with the Isicsb board. We'll show the meeting adjourned. Thank you.